What if the worst day of your life was also the first day of the rest of your life? For one waitress, a shift that started with spilled coffee and mounting bills was about to descend into a nightmare. She was forced to serve the most arrogant, demanding customer she had ever met, a man who seemed determined to break her spirit. But beneath his cruel words and cold eyes lay a secret, a connection forged in a sun-drenched childhood long forgotten. She had no idea that the man tormenting her over the temperature of his steak was not only a reclusive billionaire, but also the ghost of her past, and their collision was about to set off a chain reaction of heartbreak revelations and a choice that would cost one of them everything. The air in the Gilded Spoon was thick with the scent of truffle oil and simmering anxiety. For Maya Evans, it was the smell of survival. Each clink of silverware, each polite murmur, was a note in the symphony of her relentless hustle. At 26, her hands, which were once meant to hold fine-tipped blackwing pencils and shape clay, were now experts at balancing trays laden with overpriced cuisine. Her dreams of attending the Rhode Island School of Design were packed away in a dusty portfolio under her bed, casualties of a war waged against medical bills. Her younger brother Cody was the sun her world orbited, and his cystic fibrosis was the black hole threatening to swallow it whole. Every double shift, every swallowed insult, every pair of aching feet was a down payment on his next treatment, a desperate bid to buy him one more clean breath, one more good day. Today was not a good day. The morning had started with a call from the specialist's office. Cody's latest medication was showing diminishing returns. They wanted to discuss a new experimental trial one with a price tag that made Maya's blood run cold. The pressure was a physical weight on her shoulders as she moved through the lunch rush, her smile a carefully constructed mask. And then he walked in. He didn't so much enter the restaurant as he conquered it, dressed in a bespoke suit of charcoal grey that probably cost more than her car. He moved with an impatient energy that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. His watch, a sleek Patek Philippe, glinted under the recessed lighting. He was handsome, in a severe, sculpted way, with dark hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He was seated in Maya's section. Of course. From the moment he sat down, the ordeal began. The water wasn't cold enough. It lacked a crisp mineral finish. He'd snapped, pushing the glass away, as if it were poison. He sent back the bread basket, because the crust wasn't audibly crisp enough. Maya maintained her professional grace, her voice even and sweet. "Right away, sir. I'll get you a fresh basket." Inside, she was chanting her mantra for Cody, for Cody, for Cody. He ordered the restaurant's most expensive item, a Wagyu steak medium rare with a side of seared scallops. When she delivered it, he stared at it for a long, torturous moment before slicing into the center. "I said medium rare," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "This is at best medium. The internal temperature is clearly off by at least 5 degrees. Are the chefs in your kitchen incapable of using a thermometer?" Maya looked at the steak. It was a perfect ruby-red center, bleeding a warm pink towards the seared edges. It was a textbook medium rare. But arguing was not an option. "I'm so sorry, sir. I will have the kitchen prepare another one for you immediately." Her manager, Mr. Henderson, shot her a look from across the room, a mixture of pity and warning. "Just keep him happy." As she returned to the kitchen, the chef gave her a world-weary sigh. "Another one for Mr. Sunshine in corner booth 4, he grumbled, but he fired up the grill. The second steak was delivered with another round of apologies. This time, he didn't even cut into it. He simply poked it with his fork. "This took too long. My appetite has passed. Just bring me the check." Maya felt a tremor of rage, hot and sharp, but she forced it down, smothering it with practiced calm. "Of course, sir." He sat there scrolling through what looked like stock market reports on his phone, oblivious to the havoc he'd wreaked. He was just another rich man in a city full of them, treating the world as his personal plaything, and its people as disposable props. She returned with the bill, placing it discreetly in its leather folio on the table. He barely glanced at her, pulling out a black, featureless credit card. He tapped it on the portable machine she held the transaction approved in a silent, sterile flash. "Thank you for dining with us," she said, her voice a near whisper. As he stood up to leave, her eyes fell on the receipt still printing from the machine. She needed to tear it off for him. Her gaze caught the name authorized on the transaction. It was a name that hit her, not like a whisper from the past, but like a physical blow, knocking the wind from her lungs and making the entire restaurant tilt on its axis. E. Sterling. Sterling. The world went silent. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversation, the frantic beat of her own heart. It all faded into a dull roar. It couldn't be. It was a common enough name. A coincidence. But then her eyes darted from the receipt to his retreating back, and she saw it. A tiny, almost invisible scar, a white sliver just above his right eyebrow. The scar he'd gotten when he was 10, falling out of their rickety, hand-built treehouse in the old oak that stood between their childhood homes. The treehouse they had christened the Starship Evans Sterling. Her mind reeled, flashing back through 18 years of static. A skinny, laughing boy with eyes the same stormy color, but filled with mischief, not malice. A boy who smelled of summer grass and wood smoke. A boy who held her hand as they made a promise, burying a small tin box of their treasures under that oak tree. Her Ethan. The man who had just treated her like dirt, who had belittled and humiliated her, was the same boy who had once promised to find a cure for all the world's sadness. He was the co-pilot of their imaginary starship, the other half of a bond she thought had been severed forever when his family's moving vans had pulled away without so much as a goodbye. He was at the door now, a hand on the brass handle, ready to disappear back into his world of cold suits and colder manners. And Maya Evans, waitress and survivor, stood frozen in the middle of the gilded spoon, holding a receipt with a ghost's name on it. Her carefully constructed mask shattered into a million pieces. The name on the receipt wasn't just a name. It was a key. It unlocked a room in Maya's mind that had been sealed shut for nearly 2 decades. Its contents preserved in the amber of childhood memory. As Ethan Sterling pushed the door open and stepped into the bustling New York street, Maya was no longer in the restaurant. She was 20 feet up an old oak tree, the world a patchwork of green and gold below. She was 8 years old, with scraped knees and a missing front tooth. He was 10 lanky and all elbows, with that unruly dark hair that always fell into his eyes. He was E, and she was M. They were Sterling and Evans Adventurers, Inc. Their headquarters was the treehouse, a masterpiece of salvaged wood and crooked nails. Their mission was everything and nothing, to chart the undiscovered territories of the woods behind their houses, to catalogue every type of insect, to build a rocket ship that could reach the moon. "When we grow up," he had said one sweltering July afternoon, his voice serious, "I'm going to build a real company, Sterling Innovations, and you're going to be the head designer. You'll design everything, the spaceships, the underwater cities, everything. And you'll be the boss." she'd asked, doodling a picture of them in astronaut suits on a piece of cardboard. No. He'd corrected, looking at her with an intensity that was rare for a 10-year-old. We'll be partners, 50-50, always. They had sealed the promise with their most sacred ritual. They took their treasure box, an old shortbread tin, and placed their most prized possessions inside. For Maya, it was a smooth grey stone she'd found by the creek, and her first set of charcoal pencils. For Ethan, it was a compass that had belonged to his grandfather, and a signed baseball card of his favorite player. They'd added a Polaroid of the two of them, grinning gap-toothed in front of the treehouse. They buried the box at the base of the oak tree. "So we never forget," he'd said, "no matter what." A month later, his house was empty. No warning, no phone call, no goodbye. Just a "for sale" sign, hammered into the lawn, where they used to play catch. Maya had dug up the box, half expecting it to be a dream. But it was there. She'd sat under the tree, clutching the cold tin to her chest, feeling an abandonment so profound it had left a permanent echo in her soul. She eventually reburied it, but the promise felt broken. The partnership dissolved. Life had moved on, forcing her to trade dreams of designing spaceships for the grim reality of calculating prescription co-pays. A sharp "miss" from another table snapped her back to the present. The restaurant was still moving, the world hadn't stopped. But hers had been irrevocably altered. The man who had just left the cold, arrogant billionaire was that boy. How had the laughing, ambitious child she knew warped into this hollow shell of a man? The name Sterling Innovations, from his childhood fantasy, now adorned skyscrapers. She'd seen it in the Wall Street Journal Mr. Henderson left in the break room. Ethan Sterling was a titan of the tech industry, a reclusive genius who had taken his late father's company and turned it into a global behemoth. The humiliation she'd felt earlier curdled into a complex brew of anger, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness. He hadn't recognized her. Or worse, what if he had, and had chosen to pretend he didn't? The thought was a fresh stab of pain. Had he looked at her in her drab uniform and felt nothing but disdain for the girl he'd left behind? Her shift finally ended each remaining hour, a slow-motion torture of replaying the encounter in her mind. She clocked out, the exhaustion settling deep into her bones. Walking home, she bypassed her usual route, her feet carrying her on autopilot towards a part of the city she rarely visited, the gleaming steel and glass canyon of the financial district. And there it was, a towering monument to success, its name etched in bold silver letters against the twilight sky. Sterling Tower. His building, his company, his world. It was so far removed from the treehouse and the buried tin box that it might as well have been on another planet. He hadn't just moved away. He had ascended to a different plane of existence. Back in her cramped apartment, the smell of antiseptic from Cody's nebulizer clinging to the air. Maya sat on her bed and finally pulled out the dusty portfolio. She flipped past sketches of fantastical buildings and ergonomic furniture until she found it, the cardboard doodle from the treehouse. 2 stick figures in bubble helmets holding hands. Above them, written in her childish scrawl, were the words E+M. Partners. Always. A tear, hot and heavy, splashed onto the drawing. It wasn't just about the rudeness in the restaurant anymore. It was about the lost boy, the broken promise, the cavernous distance between who they were and what they had become. Meanwhile, in a penthouse office overlooking the city, Ethan Sterling stared out the window, his jaw tight. The second steak sat untouched on his desk, delivered by a bewildered assistant. He hadn't been able to get the waitress out of his head. There was something in her eyes, a resilience, a quiet dignity, even as he'd been berating her. It was a look he hadn't encountered in years. In his world, people were either sycophantic or terrified. She was neither. She was steady. He'd been brutal, and he knew it. The pressure of the impending hostile takeover bid from Alistair Finch's Vanguard dynamics was immense. Finch was a shark who smelled blood in the water, and the past month had been a sleepless nightmare of strategy sessions and financial fortifications. He'd gone to the restaurant to kill time before a call with his lawyers, his mind a battlefield of numbers and threats. He'd lashed out at the nearest, easiest target, a waitress. But it wasn't just her poise. There was something else, a flicker of familiarity he couldn't place. The way she tucked a stray strand of blonde hair behind her ear. The cadence of her voice. It was maddening like a word on the tip of his tongue. His phone buzzed, displaying the name Victoria. He ignored it. He walked over to his desk, and his eyes landed on the napkin that had come with the steak. The waitress had placed it beside the plate. On the corner, almost invisibly faint, was a tiny 5-pointed star, drawn with the tip of a pen. A star. The air left his lungs. Suddenly, he wasn't in his office. He was 10 years old, showing Em how to draw a perfect star in one continuous motion. "It's our secret symbol," he'd said. "It means we're a team." They'd drawn it on everything. Their notebooks, their hand, the walls of the treehouse. Em. Maya. The name hit him with the force of a physical impact. He stumbled back, leaning against the cold glass of the window. Maya Evans. His Maya. He looked down at his hands, then at the sprawling city below. He had built an empire of glass and steel, commanded armies of lawyers and analysts. But in one afternoon, in a quiet restaurant, he had taken a wrecking ball to the one pure thing he had ever built, a friendship in an old oak tree. The shame was suffocating a poison far more potent than Alistair Finch's corporate scheming. He hadn't just been rude to a waitress. He had desecrated a memory, and he had no idea how to fix it. The revelation sent a shock wave through Ethan's meticulously ordered world. Maya. It was her. The girl with sunshine in her hair and charcoal smudges on her nose. The girl who had been his only real friend, and he had treated her like she was less than human. The napkin with the small hand-drawn star felt heavier than a gold bar in his hand. It was an accusation, a memory, a question. "Do you remember?" He snatched his phone, his thumb hovering over his contacts. Who could he even call? His life was a Rolodex of transactional relationships. His fiancée, Victoria Davenport, was a strategic alliance, a merger of two powerful families designed to fortify their respective empires. Calling her for emotional guidance would be like asking a tiger for a vegetarian recipe. His board members saw him as a machine for generating profit. His assistants saw him as a source of impossible demands. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The realization was colder than the air-conditioned chill of his office. He had conquered the world, and in the process lost himself. He cancelled his evening meetings, including the crucial strategy call about the Vanguard takeover. His COO, a man named George, was apoplectic. "Ethan Alistair Finch is eating us for lunch. We can't afford to go dark now." "Reschedule it." Ethan snapped, his voice rough. "Something has come up." He left the tower, foregoing his chauffeured Tesla, for the anonymity of the streets. A cold drizzle had begun to fall, slicking the pavement and blurring the city lights into a neon smear. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay in that sterile penthouse. He needed to walk, to feel the rain on his face, to punish himself in some small way. His feet, seemingly with a will of their own, led him back towards the Gilded Spoon. It was closed now, its warm, inviting lights extinguished. He stood across the street, a solitary figure in a $1,000 suit, getting soaked, staring at the dark windows. This was where she worked. This was her life. While he was closing multi-billion-dollar deals, she was dealing with men like him, smiling through their cruelty, to earn enough to live. The shame was a physical illness churning in his gut. The boy who promised to build spaceships with her had instead created a world where she had to serve him coffee. He had to find her. He had to apologize. But what could he possibly say? Sorry, I was an insufferable monster, by the way. Remember when we were kids? It sounded insane. Pathetic. An insult on top of an injury. His mind raced. He could find her address in minutes. His resources were limitless. But showing up at her door felt like another violation, another display of power. He had to do this on her terms. He waited. He didn't know for how long. The rain intensified, plastering his hair to his scalp and soaking through his suit jacket. Finally, he made a decision. He would go back tomorrow at the end of her shift. He would wait for her, not as a customer, but as a man with a long overdue apology. The next day, Maya moved through her shift in a fog. Every customer's face seemed to morph into Ethan's. Every demand felt like a personal attack. She was jumpy on edge, torn between the hope that he might return and the terror that he would. When her shift ended at 10 p.m., she was drained. She walked out the back alley entrance, pulling her thin coat tight against the damp chill. And she saw him. He was leaning against the brick wall opposite the door, illuminated by the yellow glow of a single security light. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in dark jeans and a simple black sweater, his hair damp and unkempt. Without the armor of his wealth, he looked younger, more vulnerable and painfully familiar. He looked like an older version of her E. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She froze, one hand on the alley door. He saw her and straightened up, taking a tentative step forward. Maya. His voice was different now. Quiet, uncertain. All the sharp, arrogant edges had been sanded away, leaving something raw and exposed. She just stared, unable to speak. It's me, he said, as if it weren't painfully obvious. Ethan. She finally found her voice, and it was colder than she expected. I know who you are. I saw the name on the credit card receipt. He winced, the confirmation landing like a blow. Maya, I am so sorry. He took another step. For yesterday, that wasn't me. I was under a lot of pressure, and I was an absolute jerk. There's no excuse for it. I'm ashamed. Truly. Maya's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, a shield against him. You didn't recognize me. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Not at first, he admitted, his gaze falling to the wet pavement. My life, it's gotten complicated. I don't see people clearly anymore. But I should have seen you. I'm sorry. He looked up, and his stormy eyes were filled with a desperate sincerity. Then I saw the star you drew on the napkin. The mention of the star chipped away at her armor. It was a secret language, a direct line to their shared past. Why are you here, Ethan? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. To apologize, he said simply. And I don't know. to see if you were okay." He gestured vaguely at the restaurant. Is this what you do?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Is this all you became? She felt a surge of defensive anger. "This is how I pay my brother's medical bills," she said, her tone sharp. "It's an honest job. Not all of us had our futures handed to us on a silver platter." The barb hit its mark. He flinched. "You're right. That's not what I meant. You wanted to be an artist, a designer. I remember." "People's dreams change," she said flatly, though it felt like a lie. Her dreams hadn't changed. They had been sacrificed. He took out his wallet. Maya's stomach clenched. She thought he was going to offer her money again, a gesture that would have been the final unforgivable insult. She braced herself, ready to tell him exactly where he could put his blood money. But he didn't pull out cash. He pulled out a worn, creased photograph. It was the Polaroid from the tin box, the two of them grinning immortalized in a faded square. "I went back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "About 10 years ago. I dug it up. I was afraid you'd have thrown it away. I've kept this with me ever since." Maya stared at the photo. Her own copy was tucked away in the same dusty portfolio as her sketches. Seeing it in his hand here in this grimy alley felt surreal. It was proof that she hadn't just been a forgotten chapter in his life. He had remembered. He had gone back for their treasure. The anger and hurt that had been a raging fire inside her dwindled to a painful ember. All that was left was a profound, overwhelming sadness for the two children in the photograph and the two broken adults standing in the rain. Before either of them could say another word, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb at the end of the alley. The back window glided down, revealing a woman with an impossibly perfect blonde bob and a face that could cut glass. She was beautiful, elegant, and radiated an aura of impatient, ice-cold power. "Ethan, darling." Her voice dripped with condescending silk. "I've been trying to reach you. George said you'd gone off the grid. What on earth are you doing in this dreadful alley?" Her eyes flicked dismissively over Maya, sizing up her worn coat and waitress uniform in a single brutal glance. "And who is your friend?" Ethan's posture changed instantly. He stiffened, the vulnerability vanishing as a familiar mask of cool detachment slipped back into place. "Victoria," he said, his voice tight. "This is Maya, an old acquaintance." Victoria Davenport smiled a predatory, humorless gesture. "I see." She looked directly at Maya, her gaze designed to diminish, to erase. "Well, Ethan Alistair Finch isn't going to wait while you reminisce with the help. Get in the car. We have work to do." The word help landed like a slap. Maya felt the blood rush to her face. She looked at Ethan, waiting for him to defend her, to correct his fiancée, to do something. But he just stood there, caught between two worlds, his face a battleground of conflict and indecision. The moment stretched into an eternity. And in his silence, Maya got her answer. He had chosen his world, and she wasn't in it. With a final heartbroken look, Maya turned and walked away, leaving Ethan Sterling standing in the rain between his past and his present under the cold, watchful eyes of his fiancée. Victoria's voice, sharp as broken glass, cut through the damp air. "Ethan! Now!" He watched Maya's retreating figure, a knot of self-loathing tightening in his chest. He had done it again. In the face of Victoria's casual cruelty, he had frozen, letting her dismiss Maya as nothing nobody. He had let the boy from the treehouse down once more. He turned his expression grim and got into the car. the scent of Victoria's expensive perfume. Frederick Maule's portrait of a lady filled the leather-clad interior, a stark contrast to the smell of rain and wet asphalt in the alley. "Honestly, Ethan, what has gotten into you?" Victoria began, her tone laced with irritation as the car pulled silently away from the curb. "Vanishing for 24 hours, ignoring my calls, consorting with waitresses in back alleys. Finch's preliminary offer is on the table, and it's more aggressive than we anticipated. The board is in a panic, and where exactly?" "It's handled," Ethan said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He stared out the window, but he didn't see the glittering cityscape. He saw Maya's face, the hurt in her eyes, just before she turned away. "It is not handled," Victoria retorted. "Your father would be appalled. He built Sterling Innovations on a foundation of strength and unwavering focus. He never would have allowed sentiment to cloud his judgment." The mention of his father was a deliberate, calculated jab. Victoria knew it was his greatest insecurity, the constant crushing pressure to live up to his father's legacy. But tonight the barb didn't sting. It clarified. His father had also taught him that integrity was the one asset that could never be leveraged or sold, an asset Ethan realized he had severely devalued. "Stop the car," he said suddenly. "What? Don't be absurd." "I said stop the car." He repeated, his voice low and commanding, the voice of a CEO who did not expect to be questioned. The driver, glancing in the rearview mirror, slowed the car to a halt. "What do you think you're doing?" Victoria demanded, her perfect composure finally cracking. "I'm going to fix a mistake," Ethan said, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light. For the first time, she saw something in them that wasn't boardroom calculation or weary resignation. It was resolve. "You and I, Victoria, this partnership, it's not working. The business alliance between our families can continue if my board and your father agree. But the engagement is over." Victoria stared at him, momentarily speechless, her face a mask of aristocratic poise, contorted in disbelief, then rage. "You're ending our engagement for her. For a waitress, I'm ending it for me," he said quietly. "Because I don't like the man I've become. The man who stands by and says nothing, while you call a good person the help. The man who values stock prices more than his own soul." He opened the car door. "Goodbye, Victoria." He stepped out into the night and walked away without looking back, leaving his shocked ex-fiancée stewing in the back of her limousine. He felt a profound sense of release, as if he'd just shed a heavy, suffocating skin. The path ahead was uncertain. Ending the engagement would have serious business repercussions. The Davenport family was a key shareholder, and their support was crucial in the fight against Vanguard Dynamics. He had just handed Alistair Finch a powerful weapon. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was walking in the right direction. Maya reached her apartment building, her body trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. She fumbled with her keys, tears blurring her vision. She had allowed a flicker of hope in that alley. She had seen the boy in the man's eyes. She'd seen the Polaroid, and believed for a foolish moment that their connection had survived the years. And then Victoria had appeared, a perfect, polished symbol of the world he belonged to. His silence had been louder than any insult. It said, "You are from my past. She is my future." She finally got the door open and collapsed onto her sofa, the sobs she had been holding back finally breaking free. It was the grief of a lost childhood, the pain of a fresh wound, and the crushing weight of her reality all crashing down at once. Her phone rang, startling her. It was the hospital, her heart seized with panic. "Miss Evans," a calm, professional voice said. "It's Nurse Davies from the pulmonary clinic." Is Cody okay? Maya asked, her voice raspy from crying. He's fine, dear. That's actually why I'm calling. We've just had the most extraordinary thing happen. A new foundation, the Starlight Initiative, has just made a massive anonymous donation to our respiratory research wing. Part of the grant is specifically designated to fully fund 5 patients for the new CF-750 clinical trial, the one we discussed. Maya sat bolt upright. The trial? But the cost? It's completely covered, the nurse said, her voice filled with genuine excitement. Every treatment, every appointment, all associated costs. Dr. Matthews has already reviewed Cody's case, and he is a perfect candidate. We've placed him at the top of the list. We can start as early as next week. Maya was stunned into silence. The Starlight Initiative. It sounded like something a child would name. A child who used to draw stars on everything. E plus M. Sterling and Evans. The starship. It was him. This wasn't a guilty rich man throwing cash at a problem. This was targeted. Thoughtful. It was a lifeline thrown not just to her, but directly to Cody. He had listened in that alley. He had heard her pain, the real source of it, and had acted. This was a gesture so profound, so deeply personal, that it completely dismantled her anger, leaving her with a confusing whirlwind of gratitude and emotional turmoil. He had hurt her, and saved her in the span of a few hours. A soft knock on her apartment door made her jump. She wiped her eyes, her heart pounding. Who would be here at this hour? She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Ethan. He stood in the hallway looking exhausted and uncertain. His hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans. He hadn't followed her. He must have found her address through other means. The thought should have been scary, but right now, all she could feel was a sense of inevitability. Their worlds had collided, and the fallout was happening right here in her hallway. She took a deep breath and opened the door. He looked at her, his eyes filled with an apology she could see before he even spoke. "Maya." He began, his voice hoarse. "Can we please talk?" She held the door open, a silent invitation. He stepped inside, and the vast chasm between their lives became starkly, painfully apparent. His world was penthouse views and bespoke suits. Hers was a second-floor walk-up that smelled of turpentine and Cody's medications with a leaky faucet and a stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter. Canvases in various states of completion were leaned against one wall, vibrant, emotional, and gathering dust. He took it all in his gaze, lingering on the artwork. "You never stopped," he said, his voice soft with awe. "Even with everything you never stopped creating." "I try," she said, her arms crossed defensively. "In between shifts." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "The hospital called about a Starlight Initiative." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to help, the right way. Not with a wad of cash as an apology, but with something that mattered, something for Cody." He met her eyes. "I broke things off with Victoria." Maya was taken aback. "You what?" "Why?" "Because she was right," he said, a wry, self-deprecating smile touching his lips. "I was letting sentiment cloud my judgment, the sentiment I should have been listening to all along." He took a step closer. "When I saw you in that restaurant, Maya, it was like a mirror was held up to me, and I despised the man I saw. The boy I used to be, the one who wanted to build starships with you, would have hated him." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. He wasn't making excuses. He was confessing. My father's company. He continued pacing the small living room. I inherited it when he died 5 years ago. I thought the only way to honor him was to be ruthless, to be bigger, to be invincible. I've been fighting a hostile takeover from a corporate raider named Alistair Finch for months. It's all I've been able to think about. I let it turn me into the kind of person I never wanted to be. The kind of person who would be cruel to you. He stopped in front of her. That's why I was the way I was. It's not an excuse. It's just the truth. And I am so sorry. Maya listened to the pieces clicking into place. The stressed, arrogant man in the restaurant made a terrible kind of sense now. He was a man drowning, and he had been thrashing out at anyone who got close. Ending your engagement. Won't that make your business situation worse? She asked, her practical nature taking over. Immensely, he admitted. Victoria's family will likely pull their support, and may even side with Finch. From a purely strategic standpoint, it was the stupidest move I could have possibly made. He looked at one of her paintings, an abstract swirl of brilliant blues and desperate grasping golds. But it was the right one. Some things are more important than a stock portfolio. In that moment she saw him. Not the billionaire, not the rude customer, but E. The boy with the compass and the unwavering belief in partnership. He had made a reckless, illogical human choice. A few days later, the business world was set ablaze. The news of Ethan Sterling's broken engagement to Victoria Davenport was reported in the Wall Street Journal as a sign of instability at Sterling Innovations. Alistair Finch immediately capitalized on the chaos, increasing his offer and issuing public statements questioning Ethan's leadership. The company's stock plummeted. The board was in open revolt. Ethan, however, was strangely calm. He seemed to be operating on a different frequency. He spent hours on the phone, not with his panicked board members, but with engineers, programmers, and designers, the creative heart of his company. He also showed up at Maya's apartment again this time, with 2 large bags of groceries. I figured you might be spending more time at the hospital with Cody starting his treatment, he said simply. Thought you could use one less thing to worry about. They fell into a strange, tentative new rhythm. He would help her cook dinner. His sleeves rolled up, looking completely out of place, and yet perfectly at ease in her tiny kitchen. They talked for hours. He spoke of the suffocating pressure of his father's legacy, and she spoke of the quiet terror of watching her brother struggle to breathe. They talked about the treehouse, about their childhood dreams, unearthing memories that had been buried for years. They were rebuilding their bridge plank by painful plank. One evening, while looking at her portfolio, Ethan's eyes lit up. He was looking at a series of sketches she'd done years ago, designs for a community arts center, focused on providing therapeutic art programs for children with chronic illnesses. It was a dream she'd had for Cody, and for kids like him. "This is brilliant, Em," he said, using her old nickname for the first time. The layout, the integration of light and nature. It's not just a building. It's a sanctuary. He looked at her, his mind clearly racing. This is the answer. The answer to what? How to save my company, he said, a genuine, excited smile spreading across his face. Finch thinks Sterling Innovations is just a tech hardware company. He wants to acquire us, strip the assets, and sell the pieces. He's all about short-term profit. But he's wrong. My father started this company to build things that helped people. We've lost that vision. We need to get it back. The next morning, Ethan Sterling called an emergency press conference. He walked to the podium, not in a suit, but in a simple dark shirt, looking more like a Silicon Valley visionary than a Wall Street titan. He ignored the hostile takeover completely. Instead, he announced a radical new direction for Sterling Innovations. He unveiled the Sterling Foundation, a new non-profit arm of the company. Its first project, he announced, would be to build a national network of state-of-the-art sanctuary centers for families dealing with pediatric chronic illness, providing free access to therapeutic resources. He presented a slide with a beautiful light-filled architectural rendering. It was Maya's design. He announced that the company was pivoting a significant portion of its R&D budget away from speculative hardware and towards accessible medical technology and life-improving software. It was a massive gamble, a move that flew in the face of all conventional market wisdom. He was, in essence, transforming his company from a pure profit machine into a social enterprise. The market was stunned. Alistair Finch was furious, publicly calling it a desperate, pathetic attempt to change the narrative. But then something unexpected happened. The story went viral. Stories of the Starlight Initiative and Cody's treatment began to leak out. Maya's designs were praised by architectural critics. Tech blogs lit up with discussions of Ethan's bold new vision. The employees at Sterling Innovations, who had been on the verge of a mass exodus, were suddenly energized, rallying behind a mission they could believe in. Key institutional investors, tired of Finch's slash-and-burn reputation, began to publicly voice their support for Ethan's new long-term, human-centric vision. Alistair Finch's takeover bid, built on the idea that Sterling Innovations was just a collection of assets, began to lose its footing. Ethan had changed the very definition of his company's value. He hadn't fought Finch on his terms. He had created a whole new battlefield, one where Finch's brand of ruthless capitalism couldn't compete. Ethan had saved his company, not by being a better shark, but by remembering how to be a starship builder. 6 months felt like a lifetime. The autumn that had brought Ethan back into Maya's life bled into a winter of quiet rebuilding, which in turn thawed into a spring bursting with new beginnings. The financial world, which had been poised for a bloodbath, had instead witnessed a quiet revolution. A feature in the Wall Street Journal, which once forecasted the imminent demise of Sterling Innovations, now ran a headline that read, "The Sterling Revolution: How a Human-Centric Pivot Redefined Corporate Value." Alistair Finch, having misjudged the power of a good story, had quietly withdrawn his bid and faded back into the world of predatory acquisitions, his mystique somewhat tarnished. At Sterling Innovations, Ethan was no longer just a CEO. He was a visionary. He and Maya worked in a seamless tandem that felt both brand new and centuries old. They spent long hours storyboarding the design for the first sanctuary center, their creative energies sparking off one another. He would handle the complex logistics and technological integrations, while she would sketch and shape the soul of the place, ensuring every line, every color, and every source of light was designed with empathy. In these moments, he was simply E, and she was M, partners in building something that mattered. The most profound change, however, was Cody. The CF750 trial had been transformative. The relentless rattling cough that had been the soundtrack to Maya's anxiety was replaced by the sound of deep, easy breaths. One Saturday afternoon in the park, he had started jogging, then running, a look of pure, unadulterated shock and joy on his face as his legs pumped and his lungs held. Maya had watched him, tears streaming down her face, not of fear, but of overwhelming relief. The black hole that had threatened to consume her world was closing. And tonight, Maya Evans was not a waitress, a caregiver, or even a corporate designer. She was an artist. The Oak Tree Gallery was bathed in a warm, inviting glow nestled on a chic Soho street. The space was intimate, yet airy. the clean white walls serving as a backdrop for the riot of color and emotion that was her life's work. Her paintings, once stacked in a dusty corner of her apartment, were now the center of attention. The air hummed with a sophisticated buzz, a mix of art critics, collectors, tech luminaries from Sterling and the nurses and doctors who had cared for Cody. Maya moved through the crowd in a daze of surreal happiness. She saw Cody now taller and filled out, standing by a swirling canvas of chaotic dark blues and vibrant greens. "This one," he was explaining confidently to an older couple. "This is what it felt like trying to breathe underwater. And this green part here, that's the first time the medicine really worked. It felt like coming up for air." Dr. Matthews Cody's primary physician clasped her hand. "Maya, your work is extraordinary. You've captured the emotional reality of this illness in a way I've never seen. The entire pulmonary team is here tonight. We're all so proud of you both." Even Mr. Henderson, her former manager from the Gilded Spoon, stood awkwardly by the door, holding a glass of sparkling water. "Miss Evans, Maya," he stammered, his face a mask of awe. "I had no idea. You were always so professional. To think this was inside you all along. It's just incredible." She gave him a warm, genuine smile, the memory of his panicked expressions feeling like a lifetime ago. Her eyes scanned the room, and then she saw him. Ethan was standing near the back wall, partially obscured by a large potted fig tree. He wasn't schmoozing or making connections. He was utterly still, his attention fixed on a single painting. It was the largest piece in the collection, the one she had poured all her history into. It depicted two small, shadowy figures in astronaut helmets, holding hands beneath the sprawling protective branches of a massive oak tree. But instead of leaves, the branches were adorned with 1,000 tiny glowing stars, each a different point of light in the vast darkness. He looked at it with a reverence that made Maya's heart ache. He was dressed in a simple, well-tailored navy blue blazer and dark pants, but the tense, guarded armor he once wore was gone. He looked peaceful. He looked like home. She excused herself and made her way toward him. As she drew closer, he seemed to sense her presence, turning to face her. His stormy eyes were soft, reflecting the light of the gallery. "You came," she said, her voice barely a whisper above the din. "I wouldn't have missed this for anything in the universe," he replied, his gaze sweeping around the packed gallery, then landing back on her. "Look at what you've done, Em. You filled this entire room with your soul." "I had some help," she said, nodding toward the painting. "A good partner." He smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes. 50-50, he affirmed. "Always." He pointed to a small, almost hidden detail in the painting, a corner where the starry sky was dark and turbulent, a single star fainter than the rest. "That one. That was me when I walked into your restaurant, lost, angry, and about to burn out completely." He then looked at her. "You were the one who reminded me that stars shine brightest in the dark." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I thought I'd lost this forever." She confessed her hand, gesturing to the painting, to the innocence and promise it represented. "After you left, the first time, I thought that part of my life was just a story I told myself." "It was never just a story," Ethan said, his voice low and certain. "It was a promise. I lost the map for a while." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing against hers. The touch was electric, grounding her in the miraculous present. "You are an incredible artist, Maya, but your greatest masterpiece is your heart. The way you fought for Cody, the way you held on to your kindness in a world that gives you every reason not to. That's your real genius. She felt the last wall around her heart, the one she'd kept up just in case this was all a dream, finally dissolve. This was real. He was real. You did more than just open a door. She said, her voice thick with emotion as she finally met his gaze without any shields. You came back. You saw me when I was invisible. You helped me remember how to fly. He took her hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. They stood together in front of the painting, two halves of a story made whole again. The ghosts of the past were finally at peace, their whispers replaced by the vibrant hum of a new beginning. They weren't just looking at a painting of their past anymore. They were looking at the blueprint for their future, a blank canvas waiting for them to fill it with new adventures together. The journey of Maya and Ethan reminds us that sometimes our greatest challenges are just opportunities in disguise, and the people we've lost are not always gone forever. Their story shows that true wealth isn't measured by stock portfolios or fancy suits, but by integrity, kindness, and the courage to reconnect with the person you were always meant to be. It's a powerful testament to the fact that you can rebuild a broken past into a beautiful future. If this story of second chances, unexpected reunions, and the triumph of compassion resonated with you, please help us share it with others. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that hope can be found in the most unexpected places. And of course, if you want more stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Thank you for listening.